Welcome back to another edition of Chronic's Cocktail Hour. It's a very special Hoosier Hysteria podcast edition today. We're joined by a very special panel of guests. Starting from left to right, we have Stu Jackson from the Rivals Network, thehoosier.com. In the middle, we have friend of the podcast, Alex Bozich, editor and founder of Inside the Hall. And on the right side, we have Dr. Galen Clavio, Dr. GC on Twitter, famous from Crimson Cast, among other endeavors. As always, I'm your host, Chronic Hoosier. Allow me to introduce myself. Little change of pace this year. It's officially Miller time, bitches. Let's get it started. So it is Miller time. We're at the dawn of a new day here at IU. I had to do it.
Yeah.
It's a tall boy. We got a crock pot. Yeah. Fake Coach Wilson lives on in spirit from the tailgate lots.
There you go.
And it tastes like freedom. So, exciting times here on 17th Street. We have a new coaching regime in place. This is going to be Archie's first public event, at least on campus. He's done the tailgate tour so far, but this is the first chance for the bulk of Hoosier Nation to see him in person, to see what kind of what type of a team he's put together, what he's emphasizing. Heading into this new era, what are you guys most looking forward to? What are your markers that you're kind of looking forward to on the season with this with the new era? Stu, start with you, man. What do you expect?
I'm just looking forward to seeing how Juwan Morgan does. He's somebody that Coach Miller's talked about extensively, going all the way back to when he first met with local media and had a kind of a roundtable style session with them. He's going to play a really big role, it sounds like, with this team. He's somebody that Miller's going to look to offensively as well. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how he develops and how he maybe takes off here this junior year.
Alex, what's on your horizon?
I'm looking for a turnover percentage in the scrimmage of less than 15. I'm going to give it a big disappointment. No, I'm kidding. Deron Davis to me is I've written a lot about him. Everyone else on the beat has written a lot about him this offseason. We've seen tweets about him. We've seen his vertical jump improve apparently by 8 inches. He's lost 22 pounds. To me, he's kind of the X factor for this team if it's going to be on the high end of the some of the preseason projections that we've seen. Deron Davis has to be a guy who, to me, can play 23, 25 minutes a game, avoid foul trouble, score 12 to 14 points a game, block some shots, because really behind him, there's nobody on this roster that I see, at least on paper, that can capably fill in the post. Maybe with the exception, in terms of upside potential, Clifton Moore could be a guy that you can get some minutes out of eventually, but he's not a guy that you're going to just post up and throw the ball to in the post like Deron Davis. So to me, I'm most interested just to see how some of those things that we've heard about actually translate into watching him in 5-on-5, how different he looks. Is he more explosive around the basket? Does he defend better without fouling? And, obviously this is going to be the first look, so you don't want to take too much from a preseason scrimmage, but he's the guy I'm most looking forward to seeing here at Hoosier Hysteria.
I'm just looking forward to an Indiana basketball universe where all things seem possible for the first time in probably 3 or 4 years now. Look, certainly I think what both of you gentlemen mentioned, I agree. I think those are both things to watch. But I think the thing I'm most looking forward to is a team that plays with some cohesion. A team where everybody seems to kind of understand what their role is on the floor, where they're supposed to be, where they're not supposed to be. I feel like in 3 of the last 4 years, that just has been missing from IU basketball. It's been a very helter-skelter brand of basketball. It's yielded some good wins. It's yielded some poor defeats. And I don't think the hiring of Archie Miller is going to necessarily get rid of all that right away. But I think that an IU basketball with some identity is something that I'm really looking forward to. And I'm looking forward to seeing how this group of upperclassmen kind of establishes themselves as the leadership group and seeing what they're able to produce. I think that they're kind of, they're going to be a very important element in IU basketball and its development here over the next 5 years, because even if the team doesn't win a tremendous number of games this year, and there's certainly the chance that that'll be the case, the patterns that are set here are going to reverberate through the next 3 or 4 groups of players that we've got out on the floor. So I think it's fun. I'm excited about it. I'm excited about the optimism around the program, and it feels like a new leaf has been turned over, and I think that that's something that the whole fan base needed.
Absolutely agree with all that. And you touched on the buzz phrase, the team's identity. But I think it's as amorphous as it is, it's something that's absolutely critical. And Archie has talked a lot, pretty much from day one, from his press conference. This team's identity was going to be defensively. We heard at the media day here just last week that by players' accounts, they're spending about 75% of their practice time working on defense right now, which, I think most of us would agree has been probably their greatest long-standing liability over the last several years, was their inability to defend the basketball. Coach Crean had some prolific offenses, but ultimately they had trouble stopping them all. First of all, let's take a step back. Alex, tell everybody, what is pack line defense? Like that seems to be Archie's thing. What is a pack line defense?
I might not be the best person to explain that. That was funny at the media day. He was kind of asked to maybe expound on that a little bit and didn't really give a clear-cut explanation that I understood. I mean, anyone else have any? I mean, do you have a technical breakdown? I don't.
It's a variant of man-to-man, and I'm trying to recall. Tell you what, I have a better idea. Let's just quote from the website that actually talks about it. Let me call it up real quick here.
It's my understanding it's a man-to-man, but it's meant to stop drives.
The biggest difference between regular man-to-man and pack line, quoting from Basketball for Coaches, which seems like a legitimate site, is that instead of the off-ball defenders being out pressuring their player and denying the pass, everyone else except the player guarding the ball must be inside an imaginary line 16 feet from the rim. It's not too terribly off from the pre-3-point line Bob Knight defenses, at least in the overall conceptualization. The idea being that, you're collapsing back, you've got ball pressure, and certainly that changes if you've got people running out towards the 3-point line. But it's different than pressure defense, where you've got people up on each individual player. They were talking to Brad Underwood in the Big Ten Media Day this week, and one of the reporters asked him why his team switched from pressure to pack line halfway through the Big 12 season, and he said, well, we were getting exposed at one particular position. So, it's going to be interesting watching this particular group of players play that sort of a system, because to some degree you felt like with a lot of the defensive issues they've had over several of the years under the Crean era, guys were kind of left out on an island. You were relying on individual athleticism in order to achieve a defensive stop on an important possession. We saw a lot of possessions in a lot of important games where either there was a really intelligent coaching move that was made on the part of the opposition, or you just had a player ISO'd that was not able to handle things defensively. So this kind of is meant to address that to some degree. And we'll see how it certainly has worked in a lot of places. Tony Bennett's had a tremendous amount of success with it at Virginia, but Tony Bennett's been able to pick his players over the course of the last, how long has he been there now? 7 years now,
Right.
8 years? And this is kind of like Archie stepped up to the poker table and the hand had already been dealt for him to some degree. So it'll be interesting to see if he can mold this group into some, a group that can actually handle that level of defense.
Well, the other thing on the defense is if you look at his teams at Dayton, when he took over at Dayton, his first 3 years, there was kind of a ramping up of his defensive philosophy, getting those Ken Palm numbers that I think Indiana fans are salivating over that he had in those last 3 years at Dayton. His first 3 years at Dayton, he was a really efficient offensive coach with an improving defense, and then kind of those last 3 years they made a name for themselves based off of their defensive identity. So I think what you're going to see this year is an improved defense from last year, but I don't necessarily think it's fair to expect, a top 20, top 30-ish KenPom defense right away.
The one thing I'll say, though, I was looking at the KenPom numbers from the Crean era, and granted, a lot of it was based upon the athleticism of the players that were there at the time. But keep in mind, going into the 2015 season, IU had a for the vast majority of the season. James Blackman wasn't playing defense, period.
Thomas Bryant wasn't a great defender.
And Thomas Bryant was not a great defender either. So you managed with all of that to still finish with the 100th best defense in the country, according to KenPom. Maybe things aren't as bad as we think they're going to be.
Top 60, top 50 might not be a stretch.
Yeah.
Well, that was always the thing. If they could just get a moderately effective defense, they're going to find themselves in a lot more games. Speaking of games, who do you expect to see getting the most of the game minutes here this year? It's one thing we've got now is everybody's kind of got a clean slate coming in with the new staff. We got a very veteran team or roster coming in this year, 5 seniors. Junior class is a little thin. We just have Juwan. But everybody's starting anew. Who do you expect to see being Archie's main rotation players? Stu?
I think for starters, Colin Hartman, and that's just based off of his comments at Big Ten Media Day on Thursday. And he was kind of asked, what role do you see, Colin playing this year with, everybody coming back and who you're bringing in. And, he said he's a guy that we're going to have to play through a little bit because of his basketball IQ and just his intangibles and, how he can, impact the game in so many ways without necessarily scoring. So, I definitely see him being a factor. Josh Newkirk has, it seems like has been anointed as the starting point guard. I mean, he was the starter last year, but it seems like that's what, Archie's going to go with again, is the guy who's going to run his system. And Robert Johnson, of course, also I could see being a guy in the rotation. And then
He's even indicated that Robert might get some point time.
Yeah. Robert is going to be one of the guys that Archie's going to look to score. Same with Juwan, same with Duran. And then, of course, those are the 2 other guys that I could also see, kind of being the main 5 or the starting 5, I guess, as far as the rotation goes. And then when you look at the incoming class, Justin Smith, is the most physically ready out of any of those guys. So it wouldn't surprise me if he cracked the forward rotation a little bit and maybe found some playing time early on. I know, talking to his dad this spring after the Derby Classic in Louisville, one of the things he mentioned was that Justin was going to be working with a personal trainer leading up to his arrival at IU in June. And so those are kind of the 6 that I'm sort of keeping an eye on, or that I think will probably end up being the mainstays in Archie's rotation, at least, if you're going to name 6 guys. It might be a little bit deeper than that. I don't know. What do you think, Alex?
I mean, I'm kind of most interested to see how the guard rotation shakes out because, I think as much as you talked about Josh Newkirk kind of being the incumbent at point guard, I think there's a case to be made just kind of based on maybe grooming guys for the future too, to maybe give Curtis Jones or Devontae Green or Al Durham a big role. Archie Miller went out and re-recruited Al Durham, wanted to keep him in the program. He's talked about him being kind of an ideal fit for what they want to do defensively. And having watched him play some last high school season in person, having watched him play in AAU, while he's not a great scorer or shooter, defensively, I think he's a guy that can help at this level. And I think Devontae Green can do some things with the ball that maybe Josh Newkirk isn't capable of doing. They're a little bit different in terms of how they play, but I'm just kind of interested to see how those minutes shake out because I could see a scenario where all 5 of those guys, Robert Johnson, Newkirk, Jones, Devontae Green, and Al Durham are all playing some type of minutes. So I think this team has the potential to maybe go 9 or 10 deep at times, depending on the opponent. Do I think they're going to go 10 deep against a team like Duke? Maybe not, but early in the season, as kind of some of the kinks are being worked out, I think you might see a bigger rotation at times.
I'm really curious to see how Archie Miller adapts to being at this level of basketball, because at Dayton, he did not go deep in his bench at all. I mean, last year, they only had 5 guys play more than 55% of the available minutes. The previous 2 years, they only had 5 guys play more than 50% of the available minutes. This is not a guy who is used to going deep on his bench. Now, a lot of that might be just the lack of depth that you get generally at a private A-10 school, and you're not facing that necessarily here. So we could see a more expanded bench, but I wouldn't be shocked if he just goes with who he thinks is his top 8, and that's who he rolls with. I am very curious about the Devontae Green, Curtis Jones thing, because both of them have individually gotten mentioned in Archie's preseason comments. Curtis got mentioned early, Devontae got mentioned during Big Ten Media Day, and I think they both certainly bring certain things to the table. They both kind of got lost in the shuffle last year as the season went along. But someone's got to step in and spell either Josh Newkirk or Robert Johnson in the backcourt. Originally I was pretty sure it was going to be Curtis Jones was going to be the one, because I think he was one of the guys that stayed all summer. But Devontae's gotten a lot of good comments here recently, so maybe it ends up being him. I think that'll be an interesting challenge for observers, is like seeing how that plays out. And I think this is what Archie Miller ultimately wants, is he wants to create competition for these positions. Not just in practice, but the fact that if only 8 guys are getting into a particular game, it's like, well, you got to practice better, you got to play better to get in. I feel like sometimes, a lot of the time, we haven't seen that here, and maybe that's led to some people maybe taking minutes for granted to some degree.
To follow up on Devontae specifically, I mean, when we were talking to Archie this summer, and if you recall, Alex, he kind of mentioned Devontae as being a guy who maybe was going to be more of a situational point guard and not used as much. I mean, he had named his top 3 guys who were going to handle the ball as Robert Johnson, Josh Newkirk, and then Al Durham. Those were the guys he initially foresaw as kind of running the offense in some capacity. But through the first 14 practices or so, he mentioned Devontae at Big Ten Media Day as one of the 2 guys he was most surprised by, as far as maybe what he didn't know about beforehand. So it'll be really interesting to see how that shakes out, specifically with Devontae, because it sounds like he could be in for a bigger role at point guard than maybe Archie had imagined based on what he's seen so far in practice.
He also name dropped McBob in New York as well, as somebody who he was.
Right, that's kind of why I said maybe a little bit bigger rotation at the beginning of the year, because you're also just trying to get a feel for who you can trust.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe by the time I think some of the smaller rotation may be based on some of his time that he coaching with Thad Matta. That was what Thad Matta used to always do at Ohio State. I mean, Ohio State would play 7 or 8 guys and they'd win the Big Ten.
That's right.
And they had their best teams. And I think if you have 7 or 8 really good players that you can trust and rely upon and are going to do the things that you want to do, there's a case to be made to do it that way. I just don't necessarily know how comfortable he's going to feel in year 1 being able to do that with this cast of players, but we'll see how it develops.
At the end of the day, though, too, if you've got 12 guys who are serviceable, or more even, it certainly allows you to hold some of your starters accountable with the bench when they're not performing, when they're not upholding your standards. It sounds like that
was something that didn't happen in past years, especially defensively. There were certain guys who just, I'm not going to name names, throw guys under the bus, but there's just certain guys that played 25, 30 minutes a game, every game, regardless of past performance. And
James Blackman.
If
Jeremy Hollowell.
Hey, congratulations, Jeremy. Just got drafted today in the G League draft.
Nice. Where do you land?
Erie.
G League affiliate of the Atlanta Hawks.
I am curious.
Probably scouted him at Georgia State.
That's right. That would
make a lot of sense.
Entirely possible.
I am curious. I don't know how much we really know about any of the players right now, based upon what happened last year.
From scratch.
I mean, it was so up and down. Like, I'm imagining we're going to get freshman year or sophomore year Robert Johnson as a much greater likelihood than junior year Robert Johnson, who at times looked like he wanted to be anywhere but on the floor. And I don't blame him for that. I mean, the whole team looked that way at some point, or rather during the season. And the same thing, I mean, Juwan Morgan was certainly in and out quite a bit. It's such an unknown. And I mean, if you want to take the pessimistic viewpoint of things, I understand why some people have been picking IU 11th or 12th or 13th in the conference, because they're probably looking at those performances and saying, why would we think this IU team would be any better? There's nothing to go off of there. But then
this is a team that just crapped out in the first round of the NIT,
right,
and then put 3 people in the NBA.
That was a good Georgia Tech team.
It was a road game too, mind you.
Josh Pastner, man. I mean,
could have been a home game.
But you can look back at the histories of some of these players, whether it's Robert Johnson or whether looking at Colin Hartman when he was healthy, or some of the flashes of Juwan Morgan, and say, well, no, there's certainly the pieces there. And I think that's probably maybe the genesis of Archie's comments about how, we've still got a ways to go to some degree before we feel like we're ready to have this thing where we want it to be. Because I imagine a lot of these guys, they're still trying to refine their places in a system and on the floor for this IU team.
As down as the talent might seem, I guess there's no star, 5-star guy. I think some of these projections of 12th, and you mentioned 13th, I haven't seen that, are a bit ridiculous when you look at just some of the players on this roster. Like, there's a lot of guys who aren't star players, but these were 4-star, highly recruited guys in a lot of cases who, with a new system, with a kind of a rejuvenation of having, a new season of hope and a feeling of, that they're working towards something different, could really surprise some people. So, I've been accused of being a homer for, I think, picking them 8th, 7th, or 8th, but there's been people picking them 12th, and I'm just like,
it's not
what's
just
that based on?
And it's not just that, Alex. It's also, look at Iowa's roster. They lost their top scorer and best player, and they really don't have a lot on the roster other than that. You look at a team like Rutgers, you look at a team like Nebraska.
Ohio State has like 8 scholarship players.
Illinois does not look like they have very much. I mean, they like the
Penn State.
It's
never broken through. We hear about them every year.
Certainly anything's possible, but this idea that IU has one of the worst rosters in the conference, no, it's just wrong.
There's way more talent on this IU roster than anything.
Yeah.
So, one of my biggest question marks going into this season is where the points going to come from. Who do you project to be the team's leading scorer? Who do you project to be the go-to guys on the floor for getting baskets?
I think it'll be Robert.
Third. You mentioned Juwan Morgan. He looked awful at times, I thought, last year offensively. Just didn't know what he was supposed to do to try to create offense for himself, and we'll see how much of a step forward he takes.
I want to pause you right there, though. You said create offense for yourself, and that was one of the hallmarks of the Crean system was going out and making your own offense, beating someone through athleticism or tempo. That's probably not going to be the case going forward.
Right. I would say, beyond those two, I think the guys that you probably need to have in like the 7, 8, 9, 10 points a game range are going to be Morgan, Colin Hartman, and then somebody off the bench is going to have to be able to come in and score, whether that be Devontae Green or Curtis Jones, one of those guys. That's another reason I think they could maybe play more than people are projecting, because I don't really see Josh Newkirk as much of a guy that's going to. I mean, he shot the ball relatively well from the perimeter last year, but
especially later.
I don't know that you want him being one of your primary sources of offense.
He's probably not your A, B, or C option.
Exactly.
If the offense is functioning as it's supposed to. But that's going to be his job, and that's always kind of been Josh's thing. Josh is best when he facilitates. And, if defenses want to cheat on him and just leave him on an island by himself, then sure, take that open jumper, but otherwise look to get other guys involved first.
Yep.
So looking down the road, with all these question marks, where do you project this team finishing in the conference? Where do you project them in or out of the tournament? Where do you project the overall record? Galen, let's start with you.
30 games, right?
Is it 30 games?
Yes. They dropped the non-conference.
I think so.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I think that they're going to finish right around 500 in conference.
Or not?
I keep leaning towards 9-9. I mean, I think the schedule's strange. A lot of Friday games. it's a weird schedule compared to anything we've seen before in the conference, but everybody else is dealing with that too. And I think that they've got a big advantage in that building right over there that has served them well even in years when maybe the talent or the execution or the organization wasn't where we wanted it to be. I think the non-conference is going to be relatively difficult, although not as difficult as maybe we thought to start with. I mean, that Louisville game was looming large as a big pothole, and that suddenly looks eminently winnable, which kind of changes the complexion of the non-conference. So I think at this point, I'll say 9-9 in the conference, and I'll say probably I'll go 19 wins overall. I think that gets them into the tournament. It's probably a 10 seed, 9 seed, somewhere in that range, or maybe even slightly higher, because I think that they'll be able to rely on a robust strength of schedule for the first time since about 2006, when it takes to get into the tournament. So that'll help out quite a bit.
I would, it's weird you say 19. I was going to agree with that. I have them winning 10 Big Ten games, 10-8. Although I think there's going to be a log jam kind of in the middle there.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be
like Michigan State at 16-2, and then everybody with 11, 10, or 9 wins. Yeah.
But yeah, I think the non-conference is going to be tough. I think the key is they got to be able to win one of those games, whether it be the Louisville game, the Notre Dame game, the Seton Hall game, or even the Duke game, which obviously is going to be a really tough task just based on the talent overall on the Duke roster. But if they can get one of those, maybe even two, they're setting themselves up really, really well in terms of the non-conference resume, because even though there's a couple of your traditional Ken Pom cupcakes on the schedule, there's a lot better teams from the 100 to 200, 200 to 250 range that are really going to kind of beef up that overall non-conference strength of schedule. I would agree with Galen. They'll get in the tournament. It may be one of those deals where they're fighting for one of those final spots. But I think if they win 19 games, I think they'll be in the NCAA tournament.
Well, let's not forget, too, we don't have to travel to IPFW this year, so that's certainly a huge landmine that's out of our path this season.
Or Georgia Tech.
No trips to Atlanta.
Hey, I drove to that game with George Montgomery there and back, so I deserve a joke about it. For at least a couple more years.
A joke? You deserve a medal. Wow.
You deserve to have your car sanitized and placed in witness protection. I'm sure you heard some incriminating stories. Stu, where do you project this team?
I'm going to be a little bold, I guess, and I'm going to say this team has the talent and discipline to win 20 games, and I think they go 10-8 in Big Ten. Maybe I'm just overly optimistic. I don't know, but I just feel like, with Archie's system and just with how bought in all these guys seem, and how much they're willing to learn this new system and spend 75% of their practice on defense and whatnot. I think it's a same situation where I think they'll get into the tournament too. I'll put them at 10-8 for Big Ten play as well. But I definitely think that they have the capability of getting 20 wins, or at least 19.
The 2-game stretch I have circled actually on the calendar is Michigan and Iowa in early December. I think that's really going to tell us a lot about what we need to know, what to expect. Because traditionally Indiana's owned Iowa in this building in recent years. If Indiana is going to be a team that finishes ahead of Iowa in the Big Ten, they're obviously going to need to beat them at home. So in Michigan, I think they have some question marks too, and they've been traditionally vulnerable early in the season to home losses. So those, I think, are two opportunities for Indiana early on in the season. We talk about these non-conference games, but I guess the one benefit of having the compressed schedule with these two early December games is kind of going to give us a sneak peek at what to expect maybe in the Big Ten as well.
There's one stretch of the Big Ten schedule, I think, in January and February that's really going to tell the tale for this team. It starts on Friday the 19th, where they have to go to Michigan State. Then they get Maryland at home, then they're at Illinois, then they get Purdue at home, then they're at Ohio State, then they have Michigan State at home, and then they're at Rutgers. And that stretch goes from the 19th of January to the 5th of February.
So they probably need to do at least like 4-3 there, right?
Yeah, I mean, and I'm not too worried about. I mean, you can lose both Michigan State games. That's almost you'd almost expect that, but you can't afford to trip up against Purdue. You can't afford to trip up, against Ohio State or Illinois. You got to get at least one of those games on the road. I think that's the difference between like a 10-8 record and a 7-11 or 8-10 record in the conference. And I mean, a lot of it there is going to depend, I think, on how well is this team gelled and what direction are they going at that point.
The other thing I'm interested to see is just how this team looks on the road in the Big Ten, because other than the seasons where Indiana won the Big Ten, they were just flat out awful in most cases in road Big Ten games. And I think, this year, I'll just be interested to see how an Archie Miller-led team goes in to these Big Ten road venues like an Illinois or Ohio State or Rutgers. Do they go into those places and take care of business and win, or do they have slip-ups like we've seen years past where Indiana's won something like 2 or 3 Big Ten road games? I mean, it's just,
Can they avoid losing at Nebraska? Or can they avoid losing? I don't know. I don't think they play at Minnesota this year, but
yeah, they do.
Do they?
Yes.
Okay.
Early
That's an early one. You're right.
January
Yeah.
They play Wisconsin and Minnesota.
And I mean, there's no shame in losing at Minnesota maybe in this particular year, but maybe that gets replaced by at Illinois, where the team is middling or worse in the conference. Those are the games you really have to avoid losing.
Well, that's also the opportunity to really make the mark that Archie seems to have stressed at every opportunity. He wants his team to be remembered for its toughness, for its fight, and it's those opportunities on the road in those games where maybe historically we haven't always done the best, but with all the parity at the middle of the pack this year, one man's challenge, another man's opportunity, and he's certainly going to have a lot of opportunities to establish that identity that he's looking for in the team. So as we get ready to wrap up here, looking to the future of the Hoosiers, kind of a monumental weekend on campus here. You've got Darius Garland, Romeo Langford on official visits. You've got a plethora of other top-ranked recruits that are visiting today. You guys put a lot of work into the recruiting coverage. What are our chances here? Give us a little inside information.
I'm going to take her away. You guys handle that one, okay?
Woo!
Well,
Look into your crystal ball.
yeah.
Give us the answer.
Well, let's start here. Do we get either Romeo or Garland or both?
I think IU's got a really good shot with Romeo. Before I was saying that the top 3 for Romeo was IU, North Carolina, and Louisville, based on the amount of work the coaching staffs from each of those schools put into recruiting him. I think
Are we up or down?
now that Louisville is out of the picture because of everything that's going on over there, I think Kansas probably takes their spot, and I think it's between North Carolina, Kansas, and IU for Romeo. But I think that I think they've got a good shot. It sounds like it's down to Vanderbilt and IU for Darius Garland. If proximity is as big of a factor as it is sometimes for these kids, you certainly can't rule out Vanderbilt's chances. So I don't know. We'll see. I mean, they're saying all the right things to these guys, at least from what I'm hearing. So
I've got a lot of questions about this too. Let's get this out of the way now.
Yeah.
We've got one open scholarship, but 2 of the top-ranked recruits. Archie's totally taking both if he gets them both, correct?
oh yeah,
Yes.
no doubt.
Yes.
So, I mean, yeah, it'd just be. I mean, I'm not sure how it would shake out. I mean, again, this is just purely speculative on my end, but I would have to think that maybe you're trying to put Juwan Morgan in a position where he can graduate early or something. Now, there is nothing definitive that says that's what he's trying to do, which is why I'm making it clear that that's just speculation on my end. But they'll find a way to make room for both of them somehow if they can get them.
It doesn't have to be worked out until August of 2018. So
That's true. That's a good point. Anyway, how do you see
as much as we have talked about the new era, I think the same thing, the same principle of things have a way of working themselves out has some meaning here with the scholarship situation. If a 5-star recruit wants to come to your program, you figure out a way to make that happen. This is college athletics at the highest level. You're trying to win games, and I know for a fact that Archie and the coaching staff want next year's version of Indiana basketball to be better than this year's version. and they're going to do what it takes to make that happen. So
I think one thing that gets lost in that too, this is big time basketball, and that usually entails big time basketball players. That also includes the kids that are currently on this team right now, though. Even the kids that have previously. We're good. No, and I think that's something that's been maybe mischaracterized. Yes, we certainly had an epidemic. When you look at the numbers, over half the freshmen that Coach Green recruited here didn't finish their eligibility here. And even in an era where the transfer epidemic is at ridiculous levels, we were still way beyond anything that anybody was seeing anywhere else. So yes, maybe there was something to be said there. But at the end of the day, though, too, some attrition is natural.
Right.
Over 50%, probably not, but some's natural. And it's probably to be expected when you have a lot of guys who maybe it's not working out as they envision. Tell me, who else we got on campus right now? If you had to look beyond the 18 class, who are the big targets that are here? What names do the fans need to be chanting?
Well, the two big names to know, well, I'll start with one of them, I guess. Trace Jackson Davis. He's a kid who plays 45 minutes up the road at Center Grove. He's the son of former Indiana Pacer Dale Davis, for those who follow the NBA.
Double D!
You know, I bring that up, or I brought that up to him the first time I talked to Trace, and he didn't really react much to it or care much for it. At least that's the sense I got. But anyway, really talented kid. He's, you know, a 4-star recruit. At least that's where we've got him ranked. He's a really big priority, especially again being an in-state kid. And of course, there's
also been here like 3 times since last week.
Yeah, it's been like, you know, 3 visits in a 7-day period. He really seems to like IU as things stand right now. But there's also, of course, you know, another, you know, big target, another major front court player they're looking at in 2019 as well, right?
Keon Brooks is here, Fort Wayne.
Yeah, he's got Kentucky offer, Michigan State offer, Indiana offer. I'm sure when it's all said, Kansas offer. When it's all said and done, I'm sure he'll have a couple more offers, notable ones. To me, the interesting thing is he's maybe the best 2019 kid in the state right now, but I think Trace Jackson Davis has a chance to maybe be a better player long term. Just kind of watching where they both are in their development right now. I think Trace maybe has a little bit more room to grow. There's also going to be some younger kids, as there always are at these events, in 2020 and 2021 kids. I think Little Blackman's going to be here, obviously. He's a 2021 kid. So, you know, it's never, you invite any kid who's a potentially recruitable prospect down the road. You know, you're taking over in your first year. You're saying, hey, come on down. Come sit in the stands. I mean,
Well, let's talk about just how remarkable that is too.
Recruiting.
No, it's absolutely a recruiting event. It's kind of a meet and greet with the fans, but this is where you kind of roll out the red carpet and you let the kids come in and see what your school is all about, what your gym's all about. I don't know that we can really, that you can overstate how big his visitor list is for his very first year here. The fact that he's in with, like, we're in the hunt with Romeo, we're in the hunt with Garland, we're in the hunt with a ton of kids in 19.
Well, and
You've got 3 committed kids here too.
Yeah.
Don't forget about those guys.
And I mean, you've covered IU basketball recruiting full time much longer than I have. I mean, just from my limited experience, both being at IU as a student and you know, covering this event, I can't remember the last time when Hoosier Hysteria was as, you know, hyped as it is, just because you know, specifically who was visiting and the you know, number of high-profile kids they were bringing in to, you know, showcase the program.
I mean, the only comparable one I could think of was when they had, I'm not going to give their nickname because they don't deserve it, but the year they had Yogi Ferrell here on campus with some of his classmates, and Gary Harris was here too. I think that was maybe the last one that I can remember being as notable as this. I mean, look at last year.
2011?
Yeah, last year was, I think the only guy they had on campus that was really a big-time recruit was Billy Preston. He ended up going to Kansas.
Yeah.
Last couple of years, it hasn't been as big from a recruiting standpoint.
Which is funny too, because the previous staff they used to play like 4-dimensional chess with this weekend, trying to maximize its leverage for recruiting purposes, and maybe it didn't always work out. From what I understand, this date actually was on the podcast on the Brink. Jeremy Gray indicated that Archie gave him a date way back early in the spring. He's like, yeah, let's go with it. Please welcome Josh Margolis.
These are good cookies.
He's our visiting cookie monster. But no, Archie was like, yeah, this weekend in October works great. And lo and behold, you've got some of the best basketball players in the Midwest and the country on campus right now for it. Well, speaking of which, boys, it's about that time to head in. I think the doors open here in about 30, 45 minutes. Looks like Michigan State just tied IU up in football.
Yeah.
It's Miller time. Let's get it on. Oh, also while we're here, shout out Alex McCarthy. Had to break out the Bell's beer for you, buddy. Shout out Mike Miller. I got my weekend shirt on too. Looking forward to it. Follow these guys for outstanding coverage throughout the IU season here. What is it? STU Stu
JTH.
JTH.
Yeah, Stu JTH.
At Stu JTH.
Yep.
At Inside the Hall. At Josh Margolis.
At Margolis News.
At Margolis News.
That's serious.
It is serious. You're a newsman.
I worked for TIU FIU, the local PBS NPR, my sophomore year as an intern. That's when I came up with that handle. So
I'm just here for the top-notch WIUX coverage.
yeah.
Shout out Showtime every Thursday at 11.
Yep. Yeah.
11
He
p.m.
also has a podcast,
Yeah.
Ball isn't life.
Ball Isn't Life, which I've yet to.
You can be on. When do you want to do it?
I've never got my invite for. I've been pandering for this for how long?
It's still October.
He's interviewed every IU media member besides me.
I have. I've just interviewed Zach.
Well, we're doing our shout outs at Dr. GC, at Crimson Cast, at Eris is not impressed. The best Instagram there is. At IU Archives is joining us tonight. At Jamie Owens is somewhere here as well. We gave him a shout out earlier. Check out all the best IU pictures and multimedia stuff there is. We thank you guys for joining us. Looking forward to it. I never gave my projection. Undefeated national champions.
Woo! Monument 6 coming.
Monument number 6. NC2A's number 2 all-time March Madness team. Hang that banner, bitches. Looking forward to it, guys. We'll see you on the flip side.